morning, everyone. My name is Lois Arthur. I'm a professor at the University of Iowa in the Theater Arts Department and a former board member of Summer of the Arts and one of the directors of the Soul Festival. So welcome to this authors panel. I will just do some brief introductions of our authors and then hand it over to Dr. Irene Walker on the end in our pink jacket, who will be the moderator for the panel. She's a professor at the University of Northern Iowa, and we're very happy to have her with us in the sister school, I guess, or whatever, of the University of Iowa and the city of Iowa City. I wanted to thank our Prairie Lights for putting on this event. They've been a partner with us for the past few years, and I think it's a great place to have this kind of event. Prairie Lights is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful city community bookstore that has a relationship, very strong relationship with the community, and does a lot in terms of if you have any questions, if you have books that you want and you need to order them or want to have an event or whatever you like to do, they're very, very open to that kind of community interaction. So thank you very much for that. Also to thank our overall sponsor for the Soul and Blues Fest, Midwest One. And without further ado then, let's see. This is in yes, it is in alphabetical order. So, Venise Berry. Venise, do you want to just... Thanks. Who is a professor in the School of Journalism here and African American Studies at the University of Iowa. Venise Berry is a national best-selling novelist and prominent speaker. Her novels include So Good, An African American Love Story, All of Me, A Voluptuous Tale, and Colored Sugar Water. She's also published in academic circles based on her research, which focuses on media pop culture and African Americans. Nonfiction books include Black Culture and Experience, Contemporary Issues, The Historical Dictionary of African American Cinema, and 50 Most Influential Black Films. The book that she will be talking about today is offering words of wisdom, personal examples, cultural analysis, historical context, and suggestions for change with essays that will help readers think about the complexity of life's choices and the challenges facing women today, particularly when it comes to relationships versus careers. Our next author, Stephen Torriano Berry, is an award-winning filmmaker and former associate professor at Howard University's Department of Radio, Television, and Film. He has created and produced Black Independent Showcase, a television series for independent and student films, and has produced 2 short made-for-television movies for WPVI TV6 in Philadelphia. He wrote, produced, and directed Embalmer, a feature-length film now available on Netflix. He currently lives in Iowa City. Rachelle Chase has always loved books. In 2005, her love of reading books turned into a love of writing them with her first publication, Out of Control, a romance novella in Secrets Volume 13. Rachelle went on to write romance for New York's Kensington Publishing and others. While writing romance and living in San Francisco, Rachelle stumbled upon the amazing town of Buxton, Iowa, while visiting fellow author, friend, and her former romance writing instructor, Lee Michaels, in 2008. Unable to forget Buxton, Rachelle researched the town from afar, and when visiting Iowa, not knowing what she would do with her research while writing a romance. In 2014, she decided she'd move to Iowa and write a book. Her first nonfiction book was born on January 9th, 2017. Still unable to stop researching, she wrote a second, and which was released in January 28th, 2019. Rachelle continues to write about Buxton. And last and not least is Caleb Rainey. Caleb is a writer, performer, and producer. He hails from Columbia, Missouri, and holds a bachelor's degree in English creative writing from the University of Iowa. He co-founded the literary magazine Black Art, Real Stories, and has been published in the Little Village magazine. As a performer, he is the winner of the Des Moines Poetry Slam, the Iowa City Poetry Slam, and a two-time winner of the Fire and Ice Poetry Slam. He's done spoken word around the country, including New York City, Nebraska, Missouri, Illinois, and Iowa. He was the opening poet for Dan Brown, featured in the film Black Boy Joy, and acted in the Iowa debut of the plays Exit Strategy and Lunar Gale. When he's not writing and performing, he's actively producing local events, like Drop the Mic, the showcase of the immense talent of the Iowa City community, as well as workshops to teach youth how to write and use spoken word. So I will turn it over to Dr. Walker.
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. All right, I'm so happy to be here this morning. I'm excited about this panel and really get into some critical conversations here. So this morning we are going to discuss everything ranging from relationships and race and power. And so I want you as the audience, when we come to that moment of question and answer, I want you to really ask thought-provoking questions of our panelists. So we're going to start with a topic that I love to discuss, relationships. So I would like to ask the panelists the first question, and I want to start when we talk about relationships. In the book Driven, you discuss relationships a lot, and you mentioned communication. So we know that, or at least we should know that communication is very key. Why do you think, and again, this is for everyone, but I'll start with you, Dr. Berry. Why do you think it is so difficult or challenging in relationships to communicate? Right, I know, right? I love it.
I'm also going to save the world. I do want to make a quick addition to the introductions. The history of African-American film and the 50 most influential black films was co-authored with my brother because his expertise is film and mine is books. So we did those together, and I want to make sure that
Thank you for that, sis. I noticed I didn't hear about that.
So I wanted to make sure that I got that straight. Okay, relationships. I'm going to answer that with, in my first novel, So Good, an African-American Love Story, I explored relationships, and I do here too, but it's more of a personal kind of issue in Driven. But one of the main characters has what she calls a shit tolerance theory. And this ties to the communication issue. And so her basic premise is you need to find somebody, you have to identify, first of all, what is your shit tolerance level? And then you have to find somebody who doesn't cross it, who doesn't exceed that level. And you have to be very careful because your shit tolerance level changes as you get older, because we all know the older you get, the less shit you're willing to tolerate. So I think this is the same thing with communication. You have to find somebody, you have to decide, what is your level of communication that you need or that's necessary for you to have an effective relationship, and you have to find somebody who meets that level. If they don't meet that level, it's really hard to have a good relationship with that person. So I think I'm going to leave it at that.
Any others?
I have nothing on communication.
Yes.
Over the years, our lives have become much more involved in technology, and technology, of course, shortens the cycle for thought and a whole lot of other things, learning. How do you feel that that technology and everything in a second has affected our ability to communicate with each other?
I'm going to let our young person answer that, because he's probably more into technology than I am.
My thought is the technology is like a double-edged sword, right? We get a lot of really cool stuff, a lot of good things about communicating. My partner at the moment is in Vietnam, and without this technology, I wouldn't be able to communicate with them, right? That is such a benefit. I'm thinking about if we had to write letters back and forth, though they would be very thoughtful, and that would be cute, and I do also still write letters, but if I was sending those, I would be waiting weeks maybe to get that back, and that communication is so hard that relationship would be hard to maintain. So that comes with a really cool positive, but then it also comes with this negative of facade, of distance, and at the same time that it can offer closeness, it can offer this distance in which my peers spend a lot of time communicating with people that they don't see on a daily basis and won't see, maybe will never see, right? But they spend a lot of time thinking about how they're going to communicate with them, thinking about what those people are thinking about them because we're so connected. So it comes with this positive and this negative. I think as we continue forward, I don't think we're going to get away from technology. So what we're going to do, hopefully, as a human race, is figure out how to find that balance and to really tap into more of the positive and less of the negative. What kind of has happened, I think, is we were like kids with a new toy, and all we wanted was that toy so close to us, doing everything we possibly could with it. But soon you grow up and you learn, all right, well, I don't need to carry my blanket everywhere, right? You learn how to really manage something that you care about in a different way. And so I think we're going to get there, but it's taken a while.
I'd like to ask this question of somebody older who communicated in different ways. Because I would think that our ability or the art of communications has suffered as well, because everything is short and sweet and very quick. Could a senior citizen like myself respond?
Well, I'd say with the instantaneousness, whether that's a word or not, that we have now, it's like the brother said before, and I remember those good old days, early puppy love, junior high school. We used to have to write a letter, send a letter, wait, and wait looking at the postman every time he comes, being disappointed when it don't show up. Then all of a sudden a letter shows up and you're all excited, Today, you get pissed off. You send a text, you send a tweet, you send whatever. In fact, somebody could really use a letter. But without that, when you had to write a letter, someone could do something to piss you off and you'd have time to get over it. You'd have time to come to your senses and say, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to say that. And so I think that now, as soon as you're pissed off, and it's gone, and bridges are burnt and you can't get them back.
Okay. I wanted to say, you talk about the shortness, the brevity and the texting. What is interesting to me is the changes that has wrought in corporate America. I'm a senior business analyst, and so that's my day job. And so I'm amazed that what is acceptable now in emails, it's like these no capitalization, no punctuation, and also things that aren't really professional to say as well. And also in meetings, you can just whip out your cell phone and start doing personal texts. And I walk by and people are on Facebook. It's like, that is was of course not the thing. And then the other thing is on the social side, when it comes to dating, it seems like technology has kind of made people disposable. From the standpoint of online dating, it's like you got 2 seconds. Like, I'm going to go out with you. It's like, okay, yep, nope, not interested. Okay, next. So it's not this time to like get to know somebody, or you look at a profile and it's like, okay, boom, boom, there's my checklist. So these are like some of the downsides. But like you said, there are the upsides of it. But these are some of the things that I find that are much different, that have been taken a while to get used to.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point that you brought up with the online dating. And I remember reading the book, The S Tolerance. I won't say the word, because if I actually said that word and my mom heard me, like, she would really get me. So I say the S tolerance. the S tolerance with online dating. I know individuals say you should try it, you should really try it. But I feel like with the online dating, with the S tolerance, some people feel like, okay, because you can just click, it helps you get to that level of, okay, what will I accept and what won't I accept, quickly, so what do you think of that? Or, with the online dating and reaching that S tolerance level at a quicker pace, opposed to if you do take the traditional route of just meeting someone at the bookstore or out to eat.
Well, I think one of the things that happens in online dating is, and I actually have a little chapter about that in my book, a little essay, because I tried it and didn't like it. But anyway, as you correspond with people, you do begin to kind of get a feel for who they are. And so I think through the internet, sometimes it's harder to, well, I shouldn't say that. Some people are harder to get to know in person, and some people are harder to get to know online. And the same thing, some people are easier to get to know in person and easier to get to know online. So it kind of depends on the individual and how you assess, is this person sincere? Are they honest? Are they trustworthy? Are they somebody that I can give my heart to? And online, as they keep talking and you see all these flaws, you start to see these problems. And in person, sometimes, they'll start talking and you get to see flaws and problems. So, or vice versa, you start talking to them in person and you say, oh, this person seems okay. Or you're going online, you say, okay, this person is somebody I might want to meet. That's the nice thing about online. You kind of get to know them a little bit before you actually have to meet them, or before you actually decide to meet them.
Right.
And I think that makes a difference.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Where are you going to?
I have nothing on. Though I'm young, I'm terrible at online dating, so I just kind of stick away from that.
Yeah, I hear you. So continuing with relationship, the L word. In the book, you discuss one of the individuals that you were dating, and how some of your friends, the guy would just run when he hear the lady talk, discussing the L word, like he immediately just hit the door. But when is too soon for both men and women? And guys, you're not going to get out of this one. You're not going to let you get out of this one. But when is it too soon to bring up the L word for either male or female? Okay.
As soon as you want me to run away.
The gravity there. For me, the conversation about how long it takes or when it's appropriate to bring that up, to me, I think that all depends on yourself and how well you know yourself. So though I'm young, I've had some very serious relationships with very big and traumatic and important things happen, which required me to do a lot of reflecting, possibly younger than some of my peers. So I'm 24, but I've gone through, engagement. I've gone through a miscarriage. I've gone through things that are tough for romantic relationships, or a failed engagement, I should say. And so those required me to do a lot of reflecting that I don't think my peers have done. And therefore, I think it's close to the shit tolerance. It's the ability to know yourself and go, well, I feel this. And if I allow myself to feel, which I should when I'm trying to connect with people and have a relationship, if I can identify my own feelings well enough, if I know myself well enough, time doesn't really matter. If I'm feeling that, then I'm feeling that, and that's real.
And also, I guess if I can qualify my earlier statement. All right, now I'm 61. I've never been engaged. I've never been married. Right now, I don't plan to get married. I just don't see it. My sister and I, we've had the discussion before, because my parents, they were married for 55 years, was it? Before we lost my father. So they were a great example of what marriage is and can be. Of course, both sides, positive and negative. But like I always say, I just always felt that I got enough lap time as a kid, between my father, who whooped my butt and taught me how to work hard, and my mother, who gave me all the, the love and the nurturing that I needed. And when the time came for me to get off the lap or to fly off the nest, I feel that I was strong enough and confident enough within myself, to handle life. I think a lot of people don't get enough lap time. They don't get the love and the nurturing from home, from their parents. So whenever they go out and get into a relationship, they're looking for that love and the commitment and the security that they didn't get at home into that person. So I think they're kind of looking for that person to kind of fill in the blanks and the spots and kind of make them whole. I feel I'm whole on my own. I may die alone, and right now I'm okay with that. Hi, Miss Pfeiffer. I'll keep that one in mind.
Okay, so we're gonna segue into just a slightly different topic. Earlier you mentioned when we were talking about the texting and in corporate America, when individuals, they text and everything's just short to the point. As an educator, I think about our young people, and obviously, as we stated, technology is big, especially for our young people. So when we talk about technology and with young people and educating and teaching them the importance of a complete sentence and teaching them the importance of, YOU and not just you. How do we infuse that into our young people and still, keep that? How do we infuse it? How do we, teach them the importance of, education? And, you can have your texting, but it's also important that, you have these complete sentences as well. And I just use the sentences as an example.
I'm the perfect one to answer this because I have no kids, and I kind of joke in there. I feel like it comes to, teaching in general. Like, there's things you do at home and there's things that you don't do outside of home. There's certain behaviors that are acceptable in one environment and they aren't acceptable elsewhere. Well, it's the same thing with writing, right? Yes, you can text your friends and you can use lowercase I and no punctuation in one long sentence and you instead of YOU. But when you're in this setting, you have to do it this way. I mean, you have to, when you're writing your essays in class, I'm assuming you still have to use the correct grammar. So I think it's just that matter of teaching kids that there's a time and a place for everything. And there's a time when just the you is not acceptable. Okay. So that's all I have.
Okay.
Well, actually having a kid and fighting, so he got his face on his phone right now.
Right, I see.
Okay, he got his face on his phone right now. What? He's taking pictures? Oh. Well, that's the new one.
Truthfully, I have a little Alzheimer's, and I'm going to be honest, I kind of forgot. At first I was going to talk about my daughter and I in a relationship, and then we got in, we got into, so what were we initially trying to get to because we kind of veered off into loving some, just a person, being in love with somebody. But I thought we were talking about just relationships. And I did have a question, and then as we kept going, I said, I forgot what I was saying.
That totally understandable, no problem. Because of time, we are on a time constraint, so we're trying to move through. But we can, like I said, I love to talk about relationships. So if you have a question about relationships, and then we can come back to you, feel free.
I know.
Yes, ma'am.
This was my daughter will call me sometime, but it's short, and I haven't said what I wanted to say. And she said, I have to go. And I said, well, then don't call me till you have time. Don't call me and say, hey, how you doing? I said, oh, let me tell you what, but I got to go. Don't bother. So that's what I was going to say. If you don't have time to communicate, wait till you do. Because these little call-ups, hey, I called to see how you were doing, but you don't really
I'm
have
the
time.
daughter.
You don't have time to answer. You don't have time to listen to me. She said, well, I have to go. And I put the phone on. Hell, you don't need to call me at all then if you aren't going to listen to me. That's all I was going to say.
So that means, daughter, you have to start listening from now on.
For those here who know my mom, I do lots of listening.
Listen to me.
Gonna get my workout in.
Okay, so I want to allow you the opportunity. You were going to.
Yes, I was going to talk about, my son constantly has his face in his, telephone screen. At one point, he was constantly into these video games or some kind of screen. And I just, kept saying, no, boy, there's got to be more to life than that. There's something a lot more educational and constructive that you need to be doing and finding it's time to do. Now, just driving over here, we find out some kid just won $3 million playing video games. And I actually told him, I said, oh, Thomas, I am so sorry I kept you from playing video games. So sorry. But also, because my sister mentioned, she said something about his parents said he would play that game like 6 to 8 hours a day. I could not imagine allowing my son to play, video games 6 to 8 hours, a day. I said, unless he was making money, then we can work it out. But that said, I just think that it's interesting. Like, also, I just realized, since I actually just got him last year, custody, but they no longer teach handwriting in school. Cursive, they no longer teach cursive. So again, when you get to the thing where you can text and tweet and Twitter and, you don't really, like she was saying, if you're not somehow forced or taught, grammar and proper punctuation, and you're going to grow up without it, because other than the tweeting and texting something, type something to their phone or a computer, young people, I don't think, they don't do any writing anymore. They truly don't. So I think punctuation's in trouble.
I make my grandchildren put all those contraptions in a bag when they get in the car with me and say, talk to each other. And they say, about what? And then they start talking, they find out all kind of stuff. Oh, but that they don't talk. And you're not coming to my house, 3 or 4 of you, and everybody sit in a spot on those things. And it works. They think they're mad at me, but then they say, oh, I didn't know he was playing basketball and he was doing so-and-so. So some of it's up to us.
Thank you. All right. I want to, because as I stated, time is of the essence. So I want to get back to the books, and this will be another little segue into one of the books here. So as I was reading the beginning of Cry Tough, I was almost in tears. I really was in tears because as an educator, a kindergarten and 3rd grade teacher, and now a teacher educator, I'm so passionate and I have a heart for children. And I do not like to see children hurt. It just hurts me. And so as I read the book and the interaction with Miles and Richard, and when his mother came over and didn't want him to play with Miles because of the color of his skin, we talk about, and I was actually just at a conference, and we talk about when is too soon to talk to children about race. When is it too soon, or is it too soon? can you talk to children about race at the age of 5 years old? Because I think about the character in this book, and he just cried. So is it too soon to talk to, and again, this is coming from the book, but is it too soon to talk to kids about race?
I would love to talk about it. So my day job is I am a lead teacher of 2-year-olds at a daycare all day long, right? So I spend all day with 12 2-year-olds, and it's my job to come up with the lesson plans, my job to figure out what it is that I'm going to teach them. And 2 is younger than 5. 5, they can comprehend a lot more. But I think about this a lot because I'm a black man in early child care, which is not normal, right? And so there are questions about, one, why is your skin brown? Like that was a question 2 weeks ago, was Claire came up to me and said, why are you brown, right? Because she was a little white girl and just didn't understand, like we're learning colors and she's realizing a difference, right? And that's it. Nothing more to that than a visual difference for her. And for me, I think about what my job is as an educator, especially of the young ones, and rather than trying to sit down and talk to them about race in explicit terms of, well, I'm black and that means this, right? My job is to teach them how to treat people, right? And so what I do is I think about, all right, so she saw a difference in me. That could have been any difference that she saw, right? How do I teach her to acknowledge difference, talk about difference, accept difference? That's how I think about it. So I think the explicit conversations about race can get a little messy when you're talking to a 5-year-old, right? That they can maybe pick up things that you're not trying to teach them. And it can get a little complicated, and then they say things out in public that you're like, well, no, that's not what I was saying to you. No, right? But if we talk about how to treat people, and if we talk about, oh, my skin is brown and yours is white, and they're different, but that's okay, right? Just simply learning that basic, right, is a way in order to teach that, and that's the foundation in which they grow. The larger, more complicated questions get thrown at them, and they know how to answer it because they have that very clear foundation. We're different, and that's okay.
Okay. So we want to save the question and answer for the end after the panel discussion. So we have about 20 more minutes, and if we can save the questions for the end. A comment, if we can say the questions and comments for the end. Just write it down, write a note. Okay.
Well, I guess she's talking about one of my books. I'll jump in here. Actually, she mentioned Cry Tough, and the book I'm working with today is Tears. Okay? 2 versions, same story. Actually, Cry Tough is actually a version of the book that is actually written real time, and it actually deals with both sides. The basic premise of the book is 2 young boys meet, 5 years old, playing in a sandbox. They could have been lifelong friends, but their parents and society pit them on a collision course of hate and destruction. When they run into each other again at 18, they dang near kill each other. So, that said, Cry Tough actually deals with both sides. You actually see the black side of the story, and you actually go home with the white people and find out how, the white people, feel and respond. It's like I wanted it to be a mirror kind of a thing. Black people do this. White folks feel like this about it. White folks do this. This is how black folks feel about it. I had a friend that goes to my sister's church, and we kind of exchange books. He's also a writer, and when he read Cry Tough, he said when he was reading the black part of the story, he was right there. He was with me. But whenever he read the white part of the story, he just couldn't believe it. It just was unbelievable to him. Now, I'm not white. I don't know. I got to admit, I wrote what I thought the situations and emotions might be. So he suggested I stick with the black story. I said, no, can't do that. It's all about the mirror, trying to bring out some understanding. But after sleeping on it for a while, I said, yeah, maybe he's got a point. So I actually went back in, and I actually just stripped the white story away and stuck with the black story. And that's where Tears came from. And actually, Tears is an acronym for Teach Everybody All Racism Sucks. And so that said, that's the difference in the versions of the book. But as far as how early, how young is it? How young can you talk to people about race? I think it's just sad that after, in fact, the presentation. I don't know if we get around to doing actual presentations, or if it's just going to be a Q&A.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, because I actually had a presentation where I talk about pretty much, it's sad that even after 8 years of having a black president in America, and we thought we were making progress on the racial front. Now, of course, the clock's being turned back to make America great again, and everything, has been, uprooted. It's like we've actually gone back 50, 60, 100 years, 400 years even, and I think that is sad, that in America today, 21st century, we're still dealing with some of the same old bullshit, dealing with race, that, we should be far beyond by now. So that said, I think that, it can be confusing, for kids about race. Because I know I was confused as hell growing up in Des Moines. My experience growing up in Iowa, in Des Moines, was flawless. I mean, no drugs, no gangs, no real violence, no real problems. But race undercut all of that. Racism undercut it all, so that's where that's. I think the sooner you start talking, the better. And like the brother mentioned, he said, yes, there's a difference, but that's all right. Unfortunately, that's not being taught to everyone.
I think I agree also, when you were talking about being too young to really talk about race like that. But I do think when kids are in school, like 5, and up, I think there needs to be the diversity in the curriculum. I think, there needs to be, you need to see not just a section when we get to Black history or we get to Native American history or we get to that. It is integrated so that when you are talking about, what life was like, in whatever time period, you have examples of Native American and African American and white Americans, and you have all of that so that kids have this foundation of, seeing positive role model, not the stereotypical stuff they see on TV about all Black people in jail or all, whatever like this, but they have this foundation of positive images of other races so that when they do get those stereotypical ones, those negative images, that they can have another positive image to compound or to offset that, to say that, oh no, not all Black people are like that, not all white people, etc. When you have to talk specifically about race, I think it is when it comes up, because I remember like when I was a kid, and I think it was later in life, and I went to all white schools for my earlier part of my childhood. And I remember being called the N-word for the first time. And I didn't know really, I knew what it was. But my dad always raised me to believe in myself. I could do anything. If I worked hard, I could accomplish anything. It was all about values and, like you said, treating people. Well, when that happened, I really cried because really I did not see things like that. I did not go to school and see kids. Yes, I know they're white, and yes, I got asked, why are my gums brown? But my point is I didn't see that. I just saw people as people, and I was proud of being Black because we did talk about, historical things. So my point is that's when we had the conversation specifically about race and about, even though he told me, people are going to treat you different, etc. But that's when it was literally about race. So again, I think the hard conversations about race, to me, they happen when they organically need to happen.
And I think you bring up something that's so key. The curriculum, the curriculum in the schools, they have to change. We have to start including multiple perspectives in the curriculum, and we have to start looking at it from a different viewpoint and looking at those multiple perspectives. So I think that's great. I think that's great.
Maybe we should get that concept to Betsy DeVos, and she'll work it on through, right?
Perhaps, right. Good luck with that, right? Yeah. So, on with this conversation, and when we talk about young people, so we talk about when it's too early to have that discussion about race. But, when we talk about young people, when I look at our young people today, I feel like young people, both Black and white, I feel like they're more willing to to embrace differences, right? Like I just feel like they're more willing to embrace differences. And when I talk about young people, when you said you were 24, I'm like, oh wow, he's younger than me. He is young. So as a young person, I mean, can you speak from that? About young people and embracing, inclusivity.
I think the progress of inclusivity has mirrored how it always works generationally. The younger generation arguably is always a little more inclusive. That's just how we've been pushing forward. But I think what we also get is, touching back on technology, the visibility of people being inclusive, I think is what's really huge right now, what's playing a really big impact, is I could open my home to anyone that I could be like, I am open to anyone of all walks of life, right? And maybe only the people in town would know that I'm like that, right? But if I'm posting and I let everyone know, I have a website now that says that. I have ways in which there are stories about me that people know. When you come to Iowa City, you can come to Caleb's Spot because Caleb's Spot is for everybody, right? And you know that at a farther, your network can reach a little bit further using that technology, or just simply the presence seems bigger. Even if I've got a little small house, right? The house seems so big because y'all know about it and everyone else knows about it, and that kind of makes a big difference. And I know it used to be more of a word of mouth thing, and now we've got this technology that allows this visibility. That means when I let someone into my house that may not look like me or have the same identities that I have, I can take a picture and I post that on social media, and all of a sudden there are thousands of people who could see that. And then they go, well, I want to share that I'm also inclusive. I want to show that I can also connect with that. And I think that makes this movement seem a lot bigger, is the visibility.
Of course, one of the other elements is the media. I mean, we have seen the media be more inclusive. They have movies and they try to make sure they include the person of color. They have TV shows and the person of color is included. And unfortunately, a lot of it's stereotypical, but there are more images of racial interaction and connection than we've ever had before through the media. So these kids are growing up seeing that and understanding that. And somebody said to me at one point, and I hadn't thought about it, the kids that were born during the 8 years of President Obama, that's what they saw, was we had a black president for 8 years. And so they saw something different, a different kind of world. They grew up in a different kind of world. So anyway.
So when we talk about politics and the political climate that we're living in today, do we think that individuals across the age range, when we think about getting out and voting and everything that's happening, do we think that politics and the current presidency, do we think that it's going to change individuals? Do we think the voting numbers, do you think people are going to get out and, use their voice through their right to vote? Or do we think some people will possibly say, nothing's going to change, look at how it is now? What do we think we're going to see about a year from now? Almost, not quite.
I think 2020 is going to be one of the biggest election voter turnouts ever. And if it's not, then the American people are truly stupid. That said, I don't know. I just, in getting, with that, like again, talking about, the change. We had 8 years of, Obama, and now, we got somebody trying to roll everything back. In fact, I came up a while ago. How many of you guys know about the film, The Birth of a Nation? 1915, D.W. Griffith. Now, they said that film did more to disrupt and unhinge race relations than anything ever. And, of course, its effects and impacts are still being felt today. I believe the president occupant of the White House is just as bad, when it comes to race relations, and it's really, really a sad case. So that said, I find it amazing how people say, oh, well, who can beat Trump? Who can beat Trump? Who can beat Trump? The man was put into office with 3 million less votes. He had 3 million fewer votes than Clinton, and they still put him into office. And I guarantee you that his performance to this point has not garnered 3 million new supporters. It hasn't.
We hope not.
Well, yeah, we hope not. Yes, he has his base, and I think he's always going to hold. Like he said, he can shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue and get away with it. Okay, and with his base, I truly believe he can. But I don't think he's going to be that hard to beat, because again, I'm sure he's turned off a lot of people who voted for him the first time. But I think there are very few people, who said, "Oh, I made a mistake. I'm going to do it the next time." I don't think so. I could be wrong. In fact, I was down in Belize, and I didn't find it till the next day, right? So I woke up and, I'm just sure like everybody, oh, yeah, Hillary's president. Hillary. They said, nope, Trump won it. I said, what? Anyway, stranger things.
I think that there will be a group of people who think things won't change, which is, to me, I think the people who will subscribe to that belief are people who are in identity groups that have already always been oppressed, right? What's happening right now is that Trump is calling out more identities, I think, than any other president has in treating them terribly or not respecting them. And that is what is going to wake up a lot of other people who will think, oh, I do have to vote for sure. I used to just think whoever came into office was going to kind of look out for me, but nah, for real, I got to get out there now. Which to me is arguably not the black community. Though we were, I think we were shocked that it actually happened. At the same time, we were like, the same old shit. Like that's how this goes. But I think there were a lot of other white voters or people with different identities that were like, oh, now he's coming after me, and we need to step up to this. So I think that's the breakdown.
That's another thing that I found very interesting about, I guess, the core group of supporters. And you hear people that were saying, I'm not being listened to. I'm being ignored. I'm being ignored. I'm not being listened to. And instead of them saying, well, damn, this don't feel too good. I don't think anybody should experience this. Nobody should feel like this. Because like I said, I know I felt ignored and listened to. Minorities have felt ignored and listened to. Immigrants have felt ignored and listened to for many, 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 many years. And now there's a whole nother group that was always privileged. And of course, a lot of people want to fight back against this white privilege. Yes, it does exist. But, now that it's shifted and they feel, oh, I'm not being listened to. Instead of them saying this is not right, no one should feel like, this, they say, well, I'm not being listened to, and it's their fault. It's the black people's fault. It's the immigrants' fault. And it's like they place blame because they are not being listened to all of a sudden. And black people can't do anything to change your situation. Immigrants can't do anything to change your situation. But it's this whole divide and conquer mentality that they have to go on. They keep people separated, keep people split. As long as everybody's split, then they're more controllable. In fact, I'll just say this real quick. I remember, I think it was a documentary or something I was looking at, and they were talking about George Wallace, back in, where was he?
68.
Yeah, 68. They said when he first came out, one of his greatest fears was that, the poor white people and the poor black people would come together and raise hell and make a change. Then he said he just, breathed a sigh of relief when he realized that all the poor white people cared about was that they had a little bit more than the poor black people. As long as they had a little bit more, they were just a little bit higher on the echelon, they were okay. Well, they thought they had more, But again, even with that, then they do this blame game. They want to blame people, for something that they have no control over.
And you mentioned Birth of a Nation, and I actually have a notation of that. When we look at George Woodson from the book, when Birth of a Nation, when it came out in 1915, 1915, he was opposed to the release of the film because it glorified the Ku Klux Klan. Do you think today, he would still be in opposition to the film. We know that it was released a few years ago. Do you think, with the current climate of the country, do you think he would still be in opposition the way that he was during the early 1900s?
That's an interesting question. I do think so, because, I don't think that would have changed, of course, because George Woodson, he was a prominent lawyer in Iowa, not just in Buxton. He had an office in Des Moines as well, and he did a bunch of other stuff. He was a co-founder of the Niagara Movement, which became the NAACP. He was in 1898, he won the nomination for the file clerk for the Senate and lost by 1 vote to a white man. So the point is, he was doing a lot of things before his time. He traveled. He was very well renowned for winning cases. He spoke about, black empowerment and the importance of education and different things. So my point is, he was very active in protesting for things that he believed in. And so at that time, given the fact that the climate, that movie then obviously should not have been shown, I think today he still would feel the same way, given what's going on today, given the fact, as you were saying, in some ways things haven't changed. And there's this resurgence of that kind of mentality. So I do think that he would today be against that. And I'll stop there.
No, you can.
No.
Okay.
It was a different point.
Oh, okay.
So go ahead.
Okay. All right. We are nearing the 12 o'clock hour, so I want to give each author the opportunity. If there was one takeaway that you could extract from your book, what would be the one takeaway that you would want your readers to get?
All racism sucks.
Okay. Short, sweet, to the point.
I'll wait. I've been talking a lot. I'll let you know.
The basic premise of my book of essays, Driven, is choices have consequences. So you got to pay attention to the choices that you make, because later on down the line, you begin to realize that certain choices lead you in certain directions, and you may not have wanted to go in that direction, or you may not have realized that was the direction you were going to end up going in. So choices have consequences.
To be frank, I think that my number one takeaway from my book is just that I matter. And a lot of my book is just my experiences and ways in which I am interrogating those and breaking those down and analyzing those, simply just to continue to find the fact that I matter. So.
And the energy.
Yeah.
For the record, that joke about me being the perfect one to answer the kid question, that was a joke, okay? I want to make sure you knew that. But I think I wrote 2 books on Buxton, Iowa, and I think that the takeaway is what can happen when, people are treated equal, they're given equal access to opportunities, to jobs, to education, etc. When you have leadership who is saying it is not acceptable for there to be this division, and if you cannot accept it, you are not welcome. I think, that is the takeaway. This is what can happen when those things are in effect. And that is not what's in effect to me from the leadership right now today. So that's the takeaway, I think.
Yeah.
All right. So we have a couple of minutes before 12 o'clock, and I feel like we have some questions and comments from the audience. So now we would like to open the floor. If there are any questions and or comments, we have one in the front.
Y'all were talking about technology earlier. Over the course of time, as you've been writing, how has technology influenced your own writing?
When I was at Howard, teaching at Howard, I would tell my students just how lucky they have it. Because when I first went to film school, UCLA back in '81, And of course, I'd write a script, a feature-length script, 100 to 120 pages. So I'd write it and let a couple people read it, get notes. I'd bring some people in. We'd have a, around the table script reading. I'd make notes, go back to the typewriter, put the first page in. And I would retype 120 pages with the changes, that we made. Now, of course, with computers, basically just, cut and paste, delete, and click and drag and save and all of that. And so I think, that is the major aspect that has helped with the writing. Also, when I first began writing Tears, it actually started off as a screenplay, as a matter of fact. And I typed up a couple drafts, a couple versions of it. But it started off as a screenplay, and then I novelized it. And when I was first started writing, I had an old Mac. You guys remember the Mac Classic?
Oh yeah.
I had a Mac Classic, and I had a suitcase and lots of pillows and not pillows, foam. And I would actually put my Mac Classic in my pillow and the foam around it, and I'd travel with it and actually do my writing in different places where I go. Now, of course, I got a laptop. Life is much simpler.
Before we run out of time, I want to offer and encourage and inspire Caleb to do a little freestyle for us, because if you haven't seen him perform, he is just awesome.
All right.
And I warned him I was going to do this.
I told her not to. I think it'd be more fitting if I did a poem that is actually in my book, simply because of the conversation we've been having.
Great.
Because it talks about both education and our current political system. It's called Experiential Learning, a letter to Mr. Johnson.
Get the mic.
Oh yeah.
Into the mic. We want the mic. All right.
Or you get the handheld if it's handheld.
Do you want to stay put, or do you want
Whatever.
We want a performance. Get your handheld.
All right.
Okay, if you hold it at the top.
The top?
Yep.
Give them their money's
Great.
worth.
All right. Give them the money's worth. All right. So when I look at the White House and see the president with a white hood, face, using words as weapons and power as a plaything, I think back to 9th grade, U.S. government, where I'm more concerned about the length of the lunch line or the girls I'm assigned to sit by. But you, Mr. Johnson, were dedicated to teaching. So when you saw me settled, with my collection of colorful pens, filling in the cracks of your lectures with my own creative connections, you couldn't condone such behavior. So with swift feet and heavy hands, and you snatch my paper and crumple it like a candy wrapper and throw it in the trash. Stunned, I search the faces of my peers for comfort, but only see honor roll students passing notes, others eating sandwiches, and some avoiding my eyes. You were teaching me about government, about power, life. Learn to keep my color inside the lines because you make the rules and there are few that will stand up to you. In my next class, I found home and a trombone section playing a jazz selection when you appear. Make a treaty with my teacher. Move me to detention. Teach me deportation. Migration. Learn that home is never my own, just a place for you to point me to. So I spend my time in a silent room, accompanied by outlaws. The company feels familiar. Black and brown faces forced to feel space without sound, without speech. Learn that policy can reach down my throat and hold each note hostage. Learn the value of voice and its vulnerability. See, a guidance counselor tried to save me. Said you shouldn't be allowed to target me. Said it's time for you to be impeached. Fired, but she couldn't do it herself. Said you had all the right friends in high places and it's all about who you know. So by the end of the day, you called for a conference. You stood podium poised as my parents and I sat behind a desk. An attempt to get ahead of the truth, your story sounded like a quarter's head, only showing one side and not concerned with sins. You fabricated trouble with my attention, confident I couldn't listen if I'm too busy concentrating on colors. My brain would be too busy, and that's not what's best for me. Learn, you know my body better than me. See, I may have only gotten a C- in your class, but I still managed to learn all your lessons. So now, when I look at the TV or Twitter and see the tyranny tucked under his tongue, or notice the sound of a stomach's growl for power, or see my freedom reflected in his eyes, my peers seem surprised. And all I can think is, class is in session. Thank you.
Amen.
I'm a snapper. I am a snapper.
We do have time for more questions. We have about 10 minutes for more questions.
That's satisfying.
Or comments.
Okay.
We have one in the.
I'll just make a little comment. That was incredible as a parent of a going into third grade student
Yeah.
who has had his drawing troubled in class. I feel like I'm sorry. No, you're good. If you hold it at the top, it'll be better. Okay. I feel like that just resonates. I mean, it actually brings tears to my eyes. But I just wanted to say that when we talked about when they're at the age, my son was 5 when Trump was elected, and I fell into a grand depression. And I had to explain to him, I who had avoided all of these subjects and had not let him know what people maybe had said in the background at the playground and all this kind of stuff. Suddenly I had to say it at the worst moment, and I felt sad that I had waited. But I tried to explain it to him. It was President's Day, and he was talking about George Washington, and we tried to go into it. And I just wanted to say that several months later, one of the most amazing things happened. I gave my version of history because it wasn't being taught in school. And he had a jar of pennies, and a nickel was outside. And the nickel wanted to get inside the jar with the pennies. And the pennies said to the nickel, you know, we've heard some things about you and the things that you've been doing. And you're going to have to make a promise that you're going to change all of that before we can let you get inside the jar. And that meant so much to me. I was like, I felt like I really had power because I didn't learn about the presidents and slavery and all of that outside of the chapter context. Mm-hmm. But I feel like we do have that opportunity as parents, and maybe even in these modern schools, to kind of put in a little bit more. And I, of course, hope we will. But
good. Thank you for sharing that.
Ms. Bird, you had a comment that you wanted to make. It's time.
I've lived here a long time.
As long as you don't talk about me.
Yeah, and living here, it's a racist town. I've lived over where I've lived forever, and I'm still the only black over there. And I have a foster son, a foster brother, that when he comes to visit, the police follow him from downtown. Mm-hmm. And then I went to Atlanta, and what I was surprised in Atlanta is we were racist against each other. So we just have such a mess. And you can't blame it on anyone, but we can all believe in what we believe and stand up for it. Because I'm sick of it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, to follow him home in the car, the police car. And then I had a foster child. She was coming home, and the police went around the block 4 or 5 times, and I stood out on the porch and just waited. And then they stopped her, and then I waited till the police officer was talking to her, and I said, what's the problem? He said, well, she looked lost. I said, no, she didn't. She walked from there to here. She was coming home. But I didn't look black enough for the police to figure out that's where she was coming. So that's, you know, and until we do something about this electoral vote, we're never going anywhere. Because the individual vote is the only thing that's going to change anything. And because by the time I went to vote, they'd already picked who was going to do it. So that's what I wish we could do something about. Individual votes counting. Because it would be different, I think. Mm-hmm.
Ms. Burgess had a comment.
Well,
I know.
Well, I thought about telling an experience that I had years ago. It's a children's librarian. And I had gone to this library. Once a month, I would go around different schools and tell stories. And so I told this story, and sometimes the kids would come up and, want to hug me and all this. And so most of the time, the kids wanted to shake my hand. Well, this particular day, I extended my hand, and the little girl did that. And I said, "You don't want to shake my hand? It's okay." So she said, "No, Miss Bird, I don't want to shake your hand." I said, "Why?" My dad told me all black people were bad. I said, "What do you think? Do you think I'm bad?" She said, "No. You are good. You are my friend." True story.
So what do you think she went home and told her daddy?
I guess she told her, Miss Bird, what's her friend? I was going to tell it right after something else, a conversation you had. And I figured at that time that it was fitting for me to tell this at that particular time. That's why I wanted to tell. But you can always win children over. Mm-hmm. It comes from your heart. So, and kids are not stupid. They really know when you mean what you say and you say what you mean. There's no doubt about it that little girl was really truthful in her heart. So I imagine today she's around maybe 20, because this was years ago. But I've learned to be very honest with children, with people, because you are what you are. You're not what you say, you're what you do. So as a librarian, a former librarian, I'm retired, I chose stories that were meaningful for me and my listeners, because I've learned one thing: be honest with yourself and to love everybody. It really works. Try it if you don't. Try it. Believe it. It works. Thank you. Yeah.
We have one in the back. Okay, we have one in the back and then another question up front. Mm-hmm.
Okay. I grew up in Chile, and I came up here when I was about 17 as an exchange student, and I live in Marion, Iowa, which, if you have been there, is a little different from the rest of the world. But even Marion has changed. When I arrived, I was it. It made me, now we have a TV show, it's called The 70s Show, and I was that kid, Fez, except that Fez actually had friends, but it was a little bit like that. And so I was a foreign exchange student, which is Fez. And so we're all generic, we're all the same. And we're different, we are from somewhere, but we're not Americans. And so when I have lived here, mostly in Iowa, but in the U.S. for about 40 years now. And I still get the question, where are you from? And, all of that, because I have an accent and I don't look like most people, I guess. However, when I travel, when I go to New York, Brooklyn, nobody asks me that question. It's cool. In fact, my kids feel like they don't fit in very well because they're too white. My kids are mixed, and they grew up in Iowa. And I have a daughter who lives in California. Same thing. People don't know what to do with her. And when she tells them she's from Iowa, they don't know and they don't care, But she looks cool. She's something, different. Of course, my kids don't have accents except a Midwestern accent, and they have traveled a lot. And so these perceptions of in ways of classifying people have always fascinated me, and I have studied a lot about it, politics and history. And a lot about identity, politics, and all of that. So I'm always fascinated how Americans, because I assume all of you are Americans, to me you all belong in the same classification. And it has to do, although you may look a little bit different, to me you all look a lot like each other. I realize that's not what the census does and what the policemen do when they stop us, because I was stopped yesterday, and so I did all the right things, right? I kept my hands on.
I'm happy you're here.
And then when I saw the cop, he was young, and I thought, okay, cool, because he grew up with more diversity, and he's different from the old guys, right? Because we have all different ways of organizing race and identity. So I'm Latin American, so I have a different way of thinking. So sometimes when I see people, I try to figure out where they might be from, and then when I talk to them, and often I go, he could be Latin, a type of Latin, because Latin Americans can look like anything. I just found out Cardi B is sort of Latina. Did you know that? She made that commercial. Cardi B, she's Latina, and I'm guessing Puerto Rican, Dominican. She grew up in the Bronx. She's cool. But in the U.S., she sort of had to, in order to sell that image, she dropped the Spanish name maybe. I'm not sure. But she's very proud of her background, and she's bilingual. So a lot of the things have changed. When I first got here in the 70s, in 75, 76, that was a different world, especially Marion, Iowa. But even Iowa City was, although I noticed that it was a more fun place than Marion. So when I came back 2 years later to go to school, I got a scholarship, and I did my BA here. And then I went to Hopkins, and I went to Europe and came back. And so I have been in and out of this place, and I have seen the changes. And so even though right now there's a little bit of a drop, right, I have seen opening and some progress. And I know my statistics, and I was just recently in Chicago. I had to go get my passport at the Chilean consulate. And so I went through the south part of Chicago. And it was, I know I have been in those areas, poor areas, and the amount of poverty and despair.
One more minute.
Really amazes me. Even though I'm aware of it. I was in Harlem in the late 70s, right, when nobody used to go there. Now Harlem is sort of cool, at least parts of Harlem. So that's the thing, that there has been progress, there has been evolution, but there are a lot of things that are still there. And the economics are critical. I think that's, things have to get better for people. Education has to get better. If our kids go to a poor school, well, they end up being poor. Chances are you can do that analysis. We have that data. However, some of the lucky ones end up in a place like this. We get to go to college. We get to be in interesting places.
Yeah, I really hate to cut you off, but we're past the 15 minutes, we had one. Okay, we do have one. This will be the last one we're gonna bring. Yes, I want to bring up the mic. This will be the last question.
I would like to know who influenced you in your life, the most important person that influenced you in your life, each one of you. Who influenced you maybe to write your books? Who?
Yeah, my mama. Right.
My
mom is the one that I have the most conversations with about race. The ones that, the person who's always been there to help me unpack the experiences I've had, the thoughts and the confusion. And then she's also loves writing, and so she was a want-to-be writer. So when I was like, I like writing, she's like, yeah, be a writer, do that. So both those things for me, both those identities were very much influenced by my mom.
I think you need to go to high schools and talk to kids.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I do. Yeah. I'm starting a program
in Indiana, and I would love for you to come.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That would be great. Yes.
Probably I'd say my mother, my family. My brother and I, as you could probably imagine, have some spirited discussions. And mom kind of she mediates. So I would say probably my family.
I would definitely say both my parents. My dad taught me to believe in myself, that I could do anything I wanted, and my mom to take risks and not follow the traditional road.
Yeah, I agree with my sisters. This family, you know, my mom mostly, like I said, my dad whooping my butt and making me work hard, and also her, because it was not conscious. But she would do something, then I'd have to do it. She'd do it, then I'd have to do it. It's not conscious; it just happens like that. So I truly appreciate her good work and her projection that she's been on. Because maybe if she went the other direction, I'd be going that way too. I don't know.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to have to wrap this up. I want to thank all of you for coming out today and being with us. Let's give the panel another round of applause. Oh, thank you, Star.